Your body is constantly communicating with you, often long before your conscious mind catches up. This is not a metaphor. It is a physiological reality rooted in how the nervous system processes information. When something happens in your environment, a tone of voice, a sudden movement, a stressful email, your body often reacts milliseconds before your thinking brain has even registered what occurred. Your heart rate might increase, your shoulders might tighten, or you might feel a subtle shift in your stomach. These are not random sensations. They are your nervous system's rapid assessment of safety or threat. This is why you can sometimes feel anxious or on edge without being able to point to a specific reason. Your body has already detected something your conscious mind has not yet processed. Ancient traditions understood this deeply. In many indigenous and yogic systems, the body was seen as the primary site of knowing, not the mind. The mind was considered useful for planning and reflection, but the body was trusted as the more honest and immediate source of information. Modern neuroscience has begun to validate this ancient perspective. The work of researchers like Antonio Damasio and Stephen Porges have shown that emotional and physiological responses often precede conscious awareness. Your body is not just carrying you around, it is constantly scanning, interpreting, and responding to the world on your behalf. When you learn to listen to these bodily signals instead of overriding them with logic or willpower, you gain access to a much more accurate and useful form of intelligence. You begin to notice the subtle tightening in your chest before you agree to something you don't want to do. You feel the slight drop in energy when you're in an environment that drains you. You sense the expansion in your breathing when you're with people who feel safe. This is the foundation of somatic intelligence. It is not about becoming more in your head about your body. It is about developing a direct, felt relationship with the information your body is already providing. The more you practice noticing these signals without immediately trying to fix or explain them, the more trustworthy and clear this internal guidance becomes. In the chapters ahead, we will explore practical ways to rebuild this connection. We will look at how ancient traditions worked with the body as a source of wisdom, how tension and posture affect your nervous system state, and how simple daily somatic practices can help you return to regulation more quickly and consistently. But it all begins here, with the recognition that your body knows things before your mind does. Learning to trust and work with this knowing is one of the most powerful skills you can develop for long-term nervous system health.
The word somatic has become increasingly popular in wellness and therapeutic circles, but its meaning is often misunderstood or used too loosely. At its core, somatic simply means of or relating to the body. However, when we talk about somatic practices or somatic intelligence in the context of nervous system regulation, we are referring to something more specific and powerful. Somatic work is not just about stretching, exercising, or becoming more aware of physical sensations. It is about recognizing that the body is not a passive vessel carrying the mind. The body is the mind in many important ways. The nervous system, which includes the brain, extends throughout the entire body. Your thoughts, emotions, and physiological states are deeply interconnected through this system. When we work somatically, we are working directly with the nervous system through the body. This is different from cognitive or talk-based approaches that primarily engage the thinking mind. While the mind is important, it often comes online after the body has already responded. Somatic practices help us work at the level where the response is actually happening. Ancient traditions understood this principle long before the word somatic existed. In yoga, the body was used as a primary tool for regulating the mind and nervous system. In many indigenous healing practices, movement, breath, sound, and touch were central to restoring balance. These were not seen as supplementary to mental or spiritual work. They were considered essential. In modern therapeutic contexts, somatic approaches have gained recognition largely through the work of people like Peter Levine, somatic experiencing, and Pat Ogden, sensoromotor psychotherapy. These approaches recognize that trauma and chronic stress are often stored in the body as incomplete physiological responses. Talking about an experience may not fully resolve it if the body has not been given the opportunity to complete its natural defensive or restorative processes. This is why somatic practices can sometimes create shifts that feel deeper or more lasting than purely cognitive approaches. When you work directly with the body through gentle movement, breath, touch, or awareness, you are speaking the language the nervous system understands most directly. It is important to note that somatic work is not about forcing the body to relax or perform. It is about creating the conditions where the body can naturally return to regulation. This requires patience, curiosity, and a willingness to feel what is actually present rather than what we think should be present. We will now explore practical somatic tools that help you listen to your body more clearly, release stored tension, improve your relationship with posture and grounding, and rebuild trust in your body's signals. These are not techniques to add to an already busy life. They are ways of being with yourself that can make everything else feel more manageable.
Long before modern science began studying the nervous system, ancient traditions had already developed sophisticated ways of working with the body as a source of intelligence and regulation. These were not primitive or superstitious practices. They were careful observations passed down through generations because they worked. In many yogic traditions, the body was considered the most accessible doorway to the mind and spirit. Rather than trying to control the mind directly through thought, practitioners used breath, posture, movement, and sensation to influence their inner state. They understood that when the body is agitated, the mind becomes agitated. When the body is steady, the mind has a better chance of becoming steady as well. Indigenous healing traditions around the world have long recognized that emotional and psychological distress often shows up first in the body. Symptoms like tension, fatigue, digestive issues, or chronic pain were seen as messages, not random malfunctions. Healing involved listening to these messages and working with the body to restore balance rather than silencing the symptoms. The Stoics, while often associated with mental discipline, also emphasized the importance of the body. Marcus Aurelius wrote about paying attention to the sensations of the body and not becoming enslaved to physical discomfort or pleasure. Epictetus taught that some things are within our control and others are not, and the body was often placed in the latter category. Learning to work skillfully with bodily experience rather than fighting against it was considered part of living wisely. In many Buddhist traditions, the body was used as a primary object of meditation. Practitioners were encouraged to feel the breath, notice physical sensations, and observe how the body responded to different mental states. This was not seen as a lesser practice compared to meditating on the mind. It was considered essential training in mindfulness and equanimity. What these traditions shared was a deep respect for the body's capacity to know and to heal. They did not view the body as something to be transcended or ignored in favor of the mind. Instead, they saw the body as a wise teacher and a powerful ally in the work of regulation and clarity. Modern somatic approaches are, in many ways, rediscovering and refining these ancient insights. We now have scientific language to describe what these traditions observed: the role of the vagus nerve, the impact of posture on mood, the way trauma is stored in the body, and the power of interoception, the ability to sense internal bodily states. Let's now explore how to bring this ancient respect for the body's wisdom into practical daily life. We will look at simple ways to listen more deeply, release what no longer serves, and use the body as a reliable source of guidance and regulation.
You do not need a yoga mat, a meditation cushion, or long stretches of free time to begin working somatically with your nervous system. Some of the most effective somatic practices can be done right where you are, sitting at your desk, standing in line, or lying in bed before sleep. The key is not the complexity of the practice, it is the quality of attention you bring to it. Somatic work is less about doing something to your body and more about listening to what your body is already communicating. One simple practice is to pause several times throughout the day and notice your posture without trying to change it. How are you sitting or standing right now? Where is there tension? Where is there ease? What happens in your breathing when you simply notice without judgment? This small act of interoceptive awareness can begin to interrupt automatic patterns of tension and create space for more conscious choices. Another accessible practice is gentle movement while seated. You can slowly roll your shoulders, tilt your head from side to side, or gently twist your torso while remaining aware of the sensations that arise. These movements do not need to look like exercise. They are simply ways of bringing attention and circulation back into areas that may have become frozen or numb during long periods of sitting or focusing. You can also work with breath while at your desk. Placing one hand on your belly and one on your chest, notice which hand moves more as you breathe. Many people breathe primarily from the chest, which can keep the nervous system in a more activated state. Gently encouraging the breath to move lower into the belly without forcing it can help shift the nervous system toward greater calm over time. Another powerful desk-friendly practice is orienting. This involves slowly and gently turning your head and eyes to take in your environment, noticing colors, shapes, and the space around you. This practice helps the nervous system register that you are in a safe, stable environment, which can be especially useful if you tend to get lost in screens or internal thought loops for long periods. These practices may seem almost too simple to matter, but their power lies in repetition and presence. When you return to your body many times throughout the day, even briefly, you are training your nervous system to stay more connected to the present moment and to its own signals. Over time, this builds a foundation of embodied awareness that makes it easier to notice when you are becoming dysregulated and to return to balance more quickly. Let's now deep dive into more specific somatic themes, such as tension patterns, posture, grounding, and rebuilding trust with the body. These desk-friendly practices can serve as daily anchors that support everything else we will discuss.
Tension in the body is rarely just a physical problem. It is often the nervous system's way of holding or bracing against something, whether that something is an external stressor, an unresolved emotion, or a habitual pattern of protection. When the nervous system perceives threat, real or perceived, it prepares the body for action. Muscles tense, breathing changes, and attention narrows. If the threat passes and the system returns to safety, the tension naturally releases. But when stress is chronic or when the body does not get the chance to complete its natural defensive responses, tension can become stuck. This is why many people carry chronic tightness in their shoulders, jaw, chest, or hips, even when they are not consciously feeling stressed. The body has learned to stay slightly braced as a protective strategy. Over time, this chronic tension becomes the new normal, and the nervous system may no longer recognize it as a sign of dysregulation. Ancient traditions understood this connection between emotional experience and physical holding. In many yogic and indigenous systems, releasing tension in the body was seen as essential for emotional and mental clarity. Practices like shaking, stretching, breath work, and certain postures were used to help the body let go of what it no longer needed to hold. Modern somatic approaches have reached similar conclusions through clinical observation.
When people are guided to gently bring awareness to areas of tension and allow micro-movements or breath to move through those areas, they often report emotional shifts as well. The body and the nervous system do not separate physical tension from emotional experience as neatly as the thinking mind tends to. Releasing chronic tension is not usually about forcing muscles to relax through willpower or aggressive stretching. It is more often about creating the conditions where the nervous system feels safe enough to let go. This can involve slow, gentle movement, conscious breathing into tense areas, or simply bringing curious, non-judgmental awareness to the tension without trying to change it immediately. One useful practice is to notice a tense area and then gently exaggerate the tension slightly, without strain, before slowly releasing it. This can help the nervous system register the difference between tension and relaxation more clearly. Another approach is to pair gentle movement or breath with the thought or emotion that seems connected to the tension, allowing the body to process the experience somatically rather than only mentally. The release of unnecessary tension and the return to a more regulated state can be helped by posture, grounding, and embodied awareness support. The goal is not to live in a permanently relaxed body. It is to develop the capacity to notice when tension is protective and necessary, and when it has become habitual and unhelpful, and to respond accordingly.
Posture is not just about how you look or how your spine is aligned. It is a direct reflection and influencer of your nervous system state. The way you sit, stand, and move through space sends constant signals to your brain about whether you are safe, dominant, submissive, collapsed, or ready for action. When your posture is collapsed or chronically slumped, it can reinforce a sense of low energy, defeat, or shutdown. When your posture is rigid and overly upright, it can maintain a state of hypervigilance or tension. When your posture is balanced, open, and responsive, it supports a nervous system state that is both alert and calm, what some researchers call relaxed alertness. Breath and posture are deeply interconnected. A collapsed posture tends to restrict the diaphragm and encourage shallow upper chest breathing. This type of breathing signals low-level threat to the nervous system. Conversely, when you breathe more fully and deeply, it naturally encourages a more upright and open posture. The two systems reinforce each other. Ancient traditions paid close attention to this relationship. In yoga, specific postures, asanas, were developed not primarily for flexibility or strength, but to create the physical conditions that supported steady breathing and a calm, focused mind. In many indigenous movement traditions, posture and breath were seen as inseparable from emotional and spiritual state. Modern research in embodied cognition has shown that adopting certain postures can influence hormone levels, confidence, and even pain perception. While some of the early power posing claims have been debated, the broader principle remains well supported. The body and the mind are in constant bidirectional communication. Working with postures somatically does not mean forcing yourself into a perfect alignment all day. It means developing the capacity to notice how your posture changes in different situations and what that reveals about your nervous system state. It also means gently exploring postures that support greater regulation, not as a rigid ideal, but as an experiment in what feels more alive and sustainable. Simple ways to explore this include noticing how your posture shifts when you're in different environments or with different people. You can also experiment with small adjustments, lifting the sternum slightly, softening the shoulders, or allowing the head to rest more centrally on the spine, and observe what happens in your breathing and sense of alertness. Let's now build on this foundation by exploring grounding, interoception, and rebuilding trust with the body. Posture is one visible expression of your nervous system state.
Learning to work with it skillfully is one of many ways to support greater regulation from the inside out.
Grounding is one of the most frequently recommended somatic practices, but it is often misunderstood or reduced to overly simplistic techniques. At its core, grounding is about helping the nervous system register that you are here, now, in a physical body, in a relatively stable environment. This is especially important when the nervous system has a tendency to dissociate, spin into anxiety, or collapse into shutdown. True grounding is not just about feeling your feet on the floor. It is about the nervous system receiving enough sensory information from the body and the environment to feel oriented and safe enough to come out of protective states. This can involve physical sensation, but it can also involve orienting visually to your surroundings, noticing sounds, or feeling the support of whatever surface is holding you. Ancient traditions used grounding practices extensively. In many yogic and meditative systems, practitioners were encouraged to feel their connection to the earth, to notice the body's contact with the ground, and to use breath and sensation to anchor awareness in the present moment. These were not seen as beginner practices. They were considered essential for building the stability needed for deeper inner work. In modern somatic therapy, grounding techniques are used to help people who tend to become overwhelmed, dissociated, or flooded by emotion. The goal is not to suppress experience, but to build enough embodied presence that experience can be felt without the system becoming overwhelmed. Effective grounding practices are usually simple and sensory-based. They might include feeling the weight of your body against a chair or the floor, noticing the temperature and texture of what you're touching, slowly looking around the room and naming what you see, or gently pressing your feet into the ground while noticing the sensation of support. The key is not the technique itself, but the quality of attention. If you are doing a grounding exercise while mentally planning your day or worrying about something, it will have limited effect. The nervous system needs to register that you are here, paying attention to the present moment through the body. In daily life, grounding can be practiced in small moments, while waiting for a kettle to boil, standing in an elevator, or pausing between tasks. These micro-practices build the capacity to return to the body and the present moment more quickly when stress or overwhelm arises. Grounding also supports other aspects of somatic work, including rebuilding trust with the body and developing greater interoceptive awareness. Grounding is not a destination. It is a skill that makes all other nervous system work more accessible and sustainable.
One of the most useful somatic skills you can develop is the ability to recognize when your nervous system has shifted into a protective state, even when your mind is telling you that everything is fine. Survival mode, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, is not always dramatic. It can show up as subtle irritability, restlessness, emotional flatness, difficulty concentrating, or a vague sense of unease. Because these states can become habitual, many people no longer recognize them as signs of dysregulation. They simply feel like how I am. The body often gives earlier and clearer signals than the mind. You might notice a slight holding in the jaw, a tightening in the chest, shallow breathing, or a sense of being slightly outside your body. These are not random. They are your nervous system's way of preparing for or responding to perceived threat. Learning to notice these signals without immediately judging or trying to fix them is a powerful form of interoception. It allows you to respond to dysregulation earlier, before it escalates into anxiety, burnout, or shutdown. It also reduces the secondary stress that comes from being hard on yourself for feeling the way you do. Ancient traditions developed many practices to support this kind of embodied self-awareness. Meditation, breath work, movement, and certain forms of inquiry were all used to help practitioners become more intimate with their internal experience. The goal was not to eliminate difficult states, but to recognize them clearly and respond with greater skill. In modern life, developing this capacity requires intention. We are often trained to override bodily signals in service of productivity, social expectations, or mental narratives. Relearning how to listen and trust what we hear takes practice. Simple ways to build this skill include pausing several times a day to ask, "What is my body experiencing right now?" without needing an immediate answer or solution. You can also notice how your body feels in different environments or with different people. Over time, patterns become clearer, and you develop a more accurate internal map of what supports regulation and what pulls you out of it. It's important to understand how to work with these signals more skillfully through grounding, posture, and rebuilding trust with the body. The first step is simply learning to notice what is already happening.
Many people have a complicated or even adversarial relationship with their bodies. This can come from past experiences of illness, injury, trauma, or simply from living in a culture that often treats the body as something to be controlled, optimized, or ignored until it causes problems. When trust with the body has been damaged, it becomes harder to use somatic signals as reliable information. You might dismiss sensations as just anxiety or nothing, or you might become hyper-focused on every physical symptom out of fear. Either extreme makes it difficult to work skillfully with the nervous system. Rebuilding trust is not about forcing yourself to love your body or to always feel positive about it. It is about developing a more honest, respectful, and collaborative relationship. This means learning to listen to what the body is communicating, even when the message is uncomfortable, and responding with care rather than dismissal or punishment. Ancient traditions often modeled this kind of respectful relationship with the body. Rather than seeing physical discomfort as something to be conquered or ignored, many practices treated the body as a teacher. Pain, tension, fatigue, and illness were understood as signals that something needed attention, not as failures of the mind or spirit. Modern somatic approaches take a similar stance. Rather than trying to override the body with positive thinking or sheer willpower, these approaches encourage curiosity and gentle responsiveness. The body is not seen as the enemy or as something that needs to be fixed. It is seen as a source of information that, when listened to, can guide us back toward regulation. Practical ways to rebuild trust include keeping small promises to your body, such as resting when you feel tired or moving when you feel restless. Speaking to yourself about your body with more kindness and accuracy, and practicing interoception without immediately trying to change what you feel. Over time, these small acts of respect and responsiveness can shift the relationship significantly. The body becomes less of an obstacle or mystery and more of a reliable partner in navigating life. This shift has profound effects on nervous system regulation because a body that feels respected is more likely to communicate clearly, and a nervous system that feels heard is more likely to return to balance.
Many people who are drawn to personal growth, intellectual work, or spiritual practice spend a great deal of time in their minds. This is not inherently a problem. The mind is a powerful tool. But when we live predominantly in our heads, we can lose touch with the intelligence and regulatory capacity of the body. Living mostly in the head often looks like overthinking, analyzing emotions rather than feeling them, planning for the future as a way to avoid the present, or using intellectual understanding as a substitute for embodied experience. While these patterns can be useful in certain contexts, they tend to bypass the nervous system's need for sensory input, movement, and interoception. Ancient traditions that valued wisdom often balanced mental cultivation with embodied practices. Meditation, ritual, movement, breathwork, and time in nature were used to keep practitioners connected to their bodies and to the present moment. The mind was trained, but it was not allowed to dominate at the expense of the rest of the system. For people who tend to live in their heads, somatic work can feel unfamiliar or even threatening at first. It may bring up discomfort, numbness, or emotions that have been held at bay by constant thinking. This is normal. The nervous system has adapted to a particular way of operating, and shifting that pattern takes time and gentle persistence. The goal is not to abandon the mind or to become purely body-focused. It is to develop a more balanced relationship in which the mind and body can work together. When the body is regulated, the mind tends to function better, with greater clarity, creativity, and less reactivity. When the mind is overly dominant, the body often carries the cost in the form of chronic tension, fatigue, or disconnection. Practical ways to begin shifting this balance include scheduling short periods of embodied practice, even 5 minutes of breath or gentle movement, without trying to achieve anything mentally. Practicing interoception during everyday activities, and noticing when thinking is being used to avoid feeling. Over time, these practices can help you develop a more integrated way of being, one in which the intelligence of the body and the intelligence of the mind support each other rather than competing. This integration is one of the deepest gifts of somatic work, and it supports nervous system regulation in ways that purely cognitive approaches often cannot reach. Thank you for exploring this pillar with me. If these ideas have been meaningful, I encourage you to begin with one small somatic practice and let it grow from there. The body has been waiting patiently to be included in the conversation.